Well, starting with what Danny said, I mean, I think the caucuses in DSA have been very useful because they result in a political sorting out of views, and the debate among them is healthy. And having had the debate, though, then there's a question of where can we unite. So at the left in the 2021 DSA convention got up to 45% of the vote for some steps toward a break with the Democrats. But I think if the left had worked together better, they could have won the majority. Now that would have changed the situation in DSA, and there's a lot of detail to be said about it. But anyway, I think caucuses are a good idea, but also blocks among caucuses over specific issues like steps to break with the Democrats are a good idea too. It's not clear to me that DSA is going to survive long enough with a big enough membership to be able to try again in 2023. But if it is, then I think the caucuses should, I think Tempest, the caucus in DSA that I'm most active in, should propose some united action along those lines. Okay, the second part of what he had said, which is trade union membership on the rise in the US, that's not quite true. In fact, membership is continuing to decline in the US. What's on the rise is the popularity of unions and the fact that young people in surprising places like Starbucks or Amazon, not surprising in general thought about it, but where there has been no union activity before, are now becoming active. So it is promising. It hasn't yet reflected in an increase in trade union membership, but certainly an interest in trade union organizing. DSAers are very interested in this, and a good many of them have been involved in it as restaurant workers, as Amazon workers, more as teachers and as nurses. And there's a moment right now all over the world, I think, but certainly in the US, where the tight labor market creates particularly favorable conditions for organizing and for winning higher wages. Now, how long that'll last is probably till the next recession, which may come pretty quickly, but it certainly has the possibility of bolstering the left. For DSA, it means that young DSA activists have something they can do separate from elections, which tend to draw them into the Democratic Party, labor solidarity, or more than that, getting involved in labor organizing. So I think that is the most promising aspect of DSA right now, and a reason to stay in for now. The topic for today was not the Ukraine war, and in a way, maybe it should have been the Ukraine war. And I'd urge socialist democracy to schedule another one of these that is on the Ukraine war. There's clearly a lot to talk about. There are debates in the left, in DSA, but also in Solidarity and in Tempest and elsewhere in the revolutionary socialist movement over what to do. One thing about the US is because it is the biggest imperialist power, a lot of the left that has not gone over to the Democratic Party is sort of is hostile to imperialism and hostile to being perceived as pro-imperialist, and that's a helpful thing. So at this point, it looks like in the left, not the campus left, I won't talk about that because there really isn't time, but in the broad anti-war movement, meaning socialists who are opposed to the war but are not revolutionary necessarily, there is coming to be a view that the components of policy should be stop the war, Russia out, no NATO into Ukraine. And that's more or less what, I mean, I agree with what John said over against what Jerry said, but I think that deserves a much richer discussion than we've had. But that orientation of against NATO, as well as against the Russian invasion and wanting no war, I think is going to become a very broad position in in the left in the US. Within both Solidarity and Tempest, there are fairly sharp debates going on right now. And I think they're good debates because they're people trying to come to grips with this issue. And how do you balance the two, the point that John raised of Russia doesn't have the right to invade Ukraine with the point that Ukraine should be out of NATO and NATO should not go into the Ukraine. How do you balance these things? And what about the rights of the Russian minority in Ukraine? How do you balance that? And there are discussions of this. Now, I think some of you may have seen the Gilbert Achcar article in Fourth International, or I think that's where it is, yes, not International Viewpoint, where he's making an argument, a thesis on what he thinks should happen in Ukraine. The problem is there that he's giving backhanded support to arms coming from NATO, to NATO shipping arms to Ukraine. And I think it's one thing to say Ukraine has a right to try to get arms anywhere, but we think it's wrong to get it from NATO, to saying that backhandedly that NATO should supply arms to Ukraine. The other thing is that he says Russia should get out of the Donbass and Crimea. Well, Gilbert Achcar and what army is going to throw them out? That's a crazy position, but also it edges into pro-imperialism. And I think there's enough debate within Solidarity and Tempest over that issue. It's a chance to learn. It's a chance for younger comrades to see the debate. And while they're sort of the historic tendency, the groups that they've been associated with are going to tend to support somebody like Achcar, there is debate against him. There is fighting with him, including by me. And there's listening. So yeah, sure, there has been division. I think the sort of consensus position of the left of Democrats is going to be no war, Russia out of Ukraine, and no NATO in Ukraine. But beyond that, especially around arms, there are debates. Some around sanctions, although I think nobody thinks there should be general sanctions against Russia. There are some who think targeting some oligarchs is okay. What Jerry said, I think we really need to have a discussion over the war in Ukraine. What John said about the collapse of socialist opposition to the war, that's not how it looks here, but maybe so. I want to have more discussion of that. That is, it's not in this country the left of the Democrats supporting US or NATO action. That isn't happening. There is strong opposition to Russia being in Ukraine. I think, though, generally that John is right. The USFI is not learning lessons and doesn't want to learn lessons, and that does lead to a continued movement to the right. Now, how far that'll go, will it be offset? I tend to think it will on occasion be offset, as, for example, when anti-capitalistas in Spain was forced to quit Podemos, or the people close to the FBI were forced to quit Syriza, or the Communist Refoundation in Italy, or the PT in Brazil. These policies lead to disasters. They quit. They don't generalize the lesson, but they still quit. At the point they stop quitting, then there's no life left in the organization. But that's worth more discussion. So I think that covers at least what I remember, and we're running out of time. I do urge Socialist Democracy, though, to set up a forum, a webinar on Ukraine, because I think we need it.